Caucus and a Republican, or he's chairman of the Freedom Caucus. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Carol.
Nice to have you here. You once considered replacing Paul Ryan as Speaker because he did not support Trump. Are you confident now that he will work in concert with the president-elect?
Well, you know, I've had a number of conversations with the Speaker, and I can tell you that we're unified here in Washington, D.C. about draining the swamp, as you were talking about, making sure that Washington, D.C. works on behalf of the American people. So I'm very confident that we're going to be looking for a unified Republican majority on January 3rd and really get down to business on day one. So, yeah, a lot of things were said in the past, but I think that you can see from last night, it's really all about making sure that we hit the road and do the hard work on day one.
Hit the ground running. I know you've put together a landing book for Trump. What exactly is that?
Well, you know, what we believe is as we've got a number of issues that their transition team is looking at that goes across a number of different agencies. You know, we've actually worked real hard to come up with some 21-page report to give to the Trump transition team that actually will look at rules and regulations, things that can make our first 100 days the most productive. It's important that we let him know what was happening here on Capitol Hill, just as much as what was happening in the executive branch.
So also, is it in that book, because you say there are 200 regulations that Mr. Trump can eliminate without congressional approval. Is that part of that book?
It is. We've got 21 pages. Right now it's up to 232 recommendations in terms of rules and regulations. Many of them would save some tens of billions of dollars just with the stroke of a pen, taking some of the overreach that we've seen in the executive branch, allowing our businesses to get back to work. So the list continues to grow, but we felt like it was important to put together a real working document where they can actually look at that, make decisions. It's truly an executive branch decision,
well,
but hopefully
do that. These 200 regulations, you say that Mr. Trump can eliminate them without congressional approval. With a stroke of the pen, he can get rid of them. But isn't that what you criticized Barack Obama for doing?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Carol, because one of the interesting things is there's two different roles. One is a legislative role, the other is an executive branch role. And we're not suggesting the overreach because hypocrisy in the first degree. What we're really looking at is the overreach that we've seen in the last 8 years, actually rolling that back. These are some regulations that really can have an administrative fix that don't have a legislative fix in mind. To give you one ridiculous example, the FDA, we're sitting here working with EpiPens and everything else that have real health concerns, and yet we've got regulations on the size of breath mints. Those kinds of things just bog down the regulatory process, so most of the recommendations are much more egregious than that. The fiduciary rule for our financial
The reason
service.
I'm asking is, and I'm sure there are some ridiculous regulations on the book. I'm not arguing with you there, but I'm also sure that there are some regulations in your landing book that Democrats might not be all into, right? So
without a doubt.
Again, isn't it kind of hypocritical to say Donald Trump just get rid of them without congressional approval, because aren't Republicans doing the same thing as they accused Democrats of doing when President Obama was in the White House?
Well, I can tell you from an Article 1 and a constitutional standpoint, you'll find no one that is going to be more vigorous in making sure that we rebalance that power on the legislative and executive branch. What we've tried to do is focus purely on those things that have an executive priority, that don't have a legislative role. Anything that actually should require Congress to act, we left off of this 21-page report. So I think that you'll find that even as you go through with a fine-tooth comb, it is one that actually balances that power in the appropriate manner. But it's a valid point.
Well, and another just question for you.
Sure.
You know, lawmakers are a check on the President of the United States. So wouldn't you want lawmakers to be involved in this? Like, wouldn't you want that? Isn't that helpful for our country?
Well, I can tell you that we've had of us on the House Freedom Caucus who have been going through these rules and regulations. I'll give you a prime example. In 2013, there were 72 bills that actually passed the House, the Senate, and were signed into law. That same year, there were over 3,500 regulatory laws that were put into effect. So if you think that you can act on a congressional level as quickly as the executive branch, history shows us that that's not the case. So this is all about trying to make sure that we do that.
To take a check and balance out of the system, is it?
Well, it's not taking a check and balance out of the system.
It's more expedient for the president to do it with a stroke of the pen instead of lawmakers sitting down and doing the work.
Well, we're doing the work, and I think you're missing one critical point, and that is that anything that is legislative in its jurisdiction, we're going to fight vigorously to make sure that we keep that here. The other is, if it's rules and regulations that are the purview of the executive branch, the executive branch has had the ability to write rules and regulations going back all the way to George Washington. The Supreme Court has upheld that. And so as we look at that, it's helping identify some of those that are uniquely theirs, and the rest is keeping those legislative priorities where they should be in the Senate and the House.
All right, Congressman Mark Meadows, thanks for